Welcome to Diaspora Dialogues. I'm Chitra, co-founder of Punjab Cultural Project. In the Diaspora Dialogue series, we're going to chat with members of the Indian or Punjabi diaspora across the world to understand from them how we as cultural entrepreneurs can better engage with diaspora, network with them, and leverage them as customers, collaborators, business partners, or even investors. There's lots to learn from our panelists who've been handpicked from around the world. They would be either cultural entrepreneurs or system enablers or stakeholders in some form or the other. And I'm sure that you're going to find their insights, experiences, and learnings super useful in your own journey as a cultural entrepreneur wanting to do business with the rest of the world. Our first panelist is Raj Narula. He's a Canada based entrepreneur. He's a mentor to several founders and CEOs. He set up and exited lots of product and service businesses and raised over 100 million of funding for startups. He's been a successful cultural entrepreneur himself, with business interests in both India and Canada. Raj, is there anything before we get into the Q&A that you would like to add to my introduction of you in this context?
Certainly. I'll just take a brief minute. Thank you so much. First of all, it's a pleasure to meet both Chitra and Raman and my co-panelists for today's session. My background, really, I've lived in 5 different countries growing up. Dad was a diplomat, so we were very fortunate to travel with them. I lived in Iran, Italy, South America, and then ended up in Canada. And of course, a couple of years of my life have been spent in India. I've spent the last 20 plus years literally in the India market. And the reason for that was I looked at a tremendous opportunity of digitization and leveraging technology on how to actually help India scale as well. And so I took that first plunge back in 2005 and decided to bring technology into India and successfully launched education, fintech, and telecom-based platforms. But prior to that, my background is slightly interesting because I'm an engineer by training, but I quit my job, after working with General Electric for 5 years to actually launch an Indian restaurant. So we talk about cultural economies, and it was one of those jump right in. My dad looked at me and said, "Are you crazy?" And I said, "No, I'm not crazy. I'm not asking you for any money. I'm going to invest." My brother and I decided to invest, and we built one of the most successful Indian restaurants in Canada. Notably, it's one of the top 100 in Canada in restaurants, and then morphed into a travel business, morphed into building a travel portal, and then morphed into investing in different companies. So my background is fairly varied. I was also a big promoter of Indian culture. So I was a promoter of Indian shows, of ghazals, Bollywood singers, all of that, back in the 80s and the 90s. So I've had a deep dive into culture, but at the same time, leveraging what I consider cultural diasporas, not just aspirations, but the ability to instill and make way for others to take the lead as well in this area. So I just wanted to add that. And thank you for having me on this panel.
Great. Thank you, Raj. So let me jump into the first question that I wanted to put to you today. Okay, so let's set a little bit of context here. You have worked with cultural businesses, set up your own as well in Canada. First of all, would you say Canada has what we might call a thriving cultural economy? How would you characterize that?
Great question. So look, to kick off, yes, Canada in itself is a land of culture. It's a land of immigrants. There's no such thing except for the Aboriginal people. Canada is really based on immigration. It's based on people coming from all parts and ethnicities of the world. So in essence, we look at the Indian and the Chinese communities that make up roughly 8 to 10% of our population. The balance of the people came from Europe. They came from parts of Europe, parts of other countries, Ukraine, Russia, Australia, UK. So the Brits, the French, and the Americans obviously had a lot of influence in Canada, but the other cultures have brought a lot of their own culture. So in terms of the economy, absolutely, when we look at whether it's importing of food products, importing of food and services, importing of knowledge, yoga, Ayurvedic, I'm giving an example of the Indian businesses that have thrived. Indian food today, is top of the list. Any restaurant you go to, butter chicken has got to be on the menu. Doesn't matter whether you're a pub, whether you're a roadhouse, or whether you're an Indian restaurant. Just in itself, our economies across Canada, we must have 10,000 Indian restaurants across Canada. And therefore, that's one example of the cultural economy. The other part of it is tourism, the other part. So, yes, Canada in itself, the government has established so many programs that provide grants and capability expansion and growth for education, and as well as, mass commercialization. So, National Film Board of Canada is another example. They have a massive budget where they fund the building and the making of documentaries. And this is actually leveraged. You'd be surprised next time you're watching a documentary, wait for the titles at the end. You'll see the National Film Board of Canada as one of the sponsors of that documentary.
And having worked across both Canada and India now, and I know you've also been getting involved somewhat with some cultural enterprises in India as well.
Yeah.
What's the difference in mindset when it comes to investing in culture-led businesses in these two places?
Yeah, great question again. The last several years, I've actually had the pleasure of spending a lot of my time in the northeast of India. So one example of this is Erie Silk. Just as one example, I went to meet these artisans outside of Shillong. It's roughly 40 kilometers, but it takes 2 hours to get there because the roads are, inaccessible. It's a pretty rough ride to get into that part of the region. So what does that tell you? What it tells you is that there's so much, I would call opportunity that exists in every corner of India, every cornerstone of India. But unfortunately, the programs don't exist to help these people, to educate them, to empower them, to actually put them on the map. I had to go look for all of this. I engaged someone locally in Shillong, and I said, have you heard of this, Erie Silk? No, absolutely. Yeah, yeah. We get clothing from it. There are artisans, there are these ladies that make things. So, I spent a whole day sitting with these artisans just to try to understand what drives them. But more important, how can we take their, I call it specialty or their specialization, and try to bring it to the rest of the world. So this is one example. And like that, I've come across many. When I built my restaurants, one of the things my brother and I decided to do was actually to incorporate Indian culture and Indian artifact. So we actually customized lamps, we customized our menus, everything was handmade. So, I had artisans making our menus, which were 6 pages of silkscreen printing. This is all things that, evolved in India. We just didn't go to a printer and say, make us a black and white menu. So our idea was to promote the culture as well.
Yeah, so like you said, what's missing for these people, I think one of the gaps that we found with PCP itself is that the artisans may or may not want to be entrepreneurs. It's a lot to ask of someone who's, making silk to also find a market for it and sell it and brand it and tell the story. So, what do you think is the solution here? Like, is really empowering a layer of cultural entrepreneurs, is it a viable answer? And if it is, then what would be your tips? To these sort of cultural entrepreneurs on approaching diasporic investors like yourself to grab your attention?
Yeah, look, again, the element of that really evolves from you nailed it. The artisan doesn't necessarily want to be an entrepreneur. They don't realize that they're already an entrepreneur because that's their survival mode. An Erie Silk lady who's actually making fabric doesn't realize that her entire household runs on that. However, can she scale? No, only because everything's done by hand. So guys like myself or others who will come in can actually help her and either become not just a middleman, but become that mentor, become that facilitator. What would it take for you to make 20 of these units a week versus making two a week? So the essence then is, if you spend that time with them, build their trust, because they have the skill, but they don't have the skill to bring this to market. So entrepreneurs like us have to step in either with funding, have to provide some mentorship, guidance, and also bring someone that may have a business mind and create a small enterprise that assists these people to get to market. You instill the right qualities and the support system, the ecosystem, which is what you guys are creating. When I look at your agenda, you're building platform, academy, and accelerator, right? What you're doing is bringing the three together, and all three are needed. Trust me, every one of those components is necessary for that last mile artisan to actually be successful. So we will bring investors. My advice would be find the right investor, find the right mentor, and they're not sitting around waiting for you. They're also coming at you. So be open to the ideas that come to your way.
I'm not the artisan. I'm not the investor. I'm the entrepreneur in the middle who is facilitating a business, creating a business. I want it to be profitable. I can take it to scale. I have those skills. I can mobilize the last mile artisans. What are some of the misconceptions I might have in my mind when it comes to raising funds to do all of this?
Well, look, not everybody's an investor that is really interested in the cultural economy because people view cultural economies as a very slow-moving vertical and slow-moving and very, I would call it, not automated. It's, very factually, everything's done by hand. So if I had to get, I gave the example of Erie Silk, this person can produce 10 shawls a week. You're not going to build a business on 10 shawls a week, right? So now you've got to find five others who can add to that. And perhaps down the road, look at automation of some sort. But if you do the automation, you lose the element of the hand prepared, handmade products. So I think as an investor, entrepreneur, yes, you've got to recognize the skills that you're looking at. And at the same time, if you're going to invest in them or bring the investment to them to be able to demonstrate the bigger picture and the roadmap. A 3 month, 6 month, 12-month roadmap is so critical. People always ask for 3-year roadmaps. I don't believe in 3-year roadmaps. You don't know what's going to happen tomorrow. So, be clear, keep it a very short window so that short window demonstrates achieving results and measurable results. So, those are the elements that investors look for and investors always look at. I mean, I look at this, I speak to entrepreneurs. The passion is number one. You can't teach passion, right? You either have it, it's like the two of you. You and Raymond are building something because it's your passion. And what you're going to do is you're going to enable thousands of people to achieve their future. But that didn't start because somebody said, here's, $1 million, go do it. This is your money. You guys are investing. This is what investors do, right? And this is what we all are built on. I'll leave with a couple of parting thoughts. Trust is a very important one. One of the elements that I've learned in my last, 20, I'm going to say 35 years of doing business across the India-Canada corridor, first with my restaurants and then with my tech work. I've found one commonality, and that is trust. It's about transparency. And a lot of us experience this in India. When people are working on a project, they'll tell you, kal ho jayega, kal ho jayega. But the kal is not tomorrow. The kal is, whenever next time you talk to them. So the essence is that, if you're an artisan, if you're an entrepreneur, if you're a, artisan or I'd call it a cultural economy participant or building a business, always be transparent. If you're not going to get this done tomorrow, tell someone that, look, it's going to take me 5 days, but in day 5, you will have it, and hopefully on day 4 and not on day 6. Very important and very critical. The second point was about the integration. When I was running my tech business, I had over 200 people working for me in India and many centers. And we would bring them into Canada for that, that experience on the ground. So we'd get them to spend a month there, but we didn't put them in a hotel. I had actually arranged homestays for them. And the reason for that was that they need to get into the fabric of what they're working with, fabric of the society here. So I'd leave it on that note, but transparency, in my opinion, and honesty is the number one skill that any cultural entrepreneur must put on the table from day one.
Yeah. Thank you so much for your time, for your input, your insights, and for sharing. And we hope to remain connected with each one of you as we progress on our PCP journey.